Football Then and Now, a fun look at football nostalgia and the modern game intertwined. Join us.
Well, we are back for a special landmark 50th episode of Football Then and Now. And waiting in the wings is my co-host and cousin, Chris. I'm going to just bring him in right now. And we've also got a special guest, but Chris, how are you? How are things? The 50th episode, mate. We finally got there 14 months later.
I know you would think 14 months we should be higher than 50 episodes, haven't we? But obviously we are here, and it's a good milestone to hit. Obviously, here's to the next 50 plus more, mate.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Perfectly put. Our guest today is a returning guest who came on last year for episode 8 with Chris on the show, Football Then and Now, obviously. And it is the host of the Unholy Trinity Everton Podcast and also a man who does the fans' voice on BBC Sport. He does a weekly article on our beloved Everton. It's Mr. Mike Richards back on Football Then and Now. How are you, Mike?
I'm not too bad, lad. Not too bad. Just a few technical issues to kick the afternoon off, but no, we're here now. So looking forward to the chat.
First and foremost, before we go into the topics off Everton, because I want you to have a little break from Everton, but I just want you to talk to our viewers and listeners about the Unholy Trinity podcast. Obviously, you spoke to Chris last year about it, but obviously people that haven't heard of the show before, just formulating the show, and you've just hit, I think it's 260 episodes, isn't it, if I'm correct?
That's right, mate. Yeah, and if those who haven't heard about it, why haven't you heard about us? I'm only
Exactly.
joking. We've been going for 6 years now. It's been a long time, through a lot of difficult times for the football club, of course. We've all lived through them, and we've come out the other side now, thankfully. But we tend to record once a week after the game at the weekend. We look back at the game itself, the major talking points, the major news from the club. And we have a nice little conversation around that. Obviously, have guests on as well. And we try and just get to the bottom of any kind of deep and meaningful conversations about our beloved Everton Football Club.
Chris, anything for Mike before I move on to the fans' voice, of course?
Mike, back when we first met, about 2 years ago now, isn't it? We were doing obviously our old podcast, Big Fight Weekly, and we were always planned to get you on, but obviously things change as things do in life. Is there anything you would have brought up that you kind of want to sort of throw in now? Boxing and who did you follow? What was something that you're sort of pushed towards boxing?
I've always enjoyed boxing, but I think as I sort of got older into my 20s, I started to really take it a bit more seriously, attending obviously some of the major matchroom cards really. I think Eddie Hearn got a lot of people on board, and he's got bigger and bigger and bigger. Followed Tony Bellew around, went to many of his fights, Anthony Joshua, been to many of his fights, including the one against Daniel Dubois in September at Wembley Stadium. Done a bit of boxing writing, done a little bit for Susie Wong, who makes the boxing shorts, one of basically the major player in the game as well. So I've always had a love of boxing, and it's just never gone away. And I think that the sport itself is so big now. It's on an absolutely massive scale. You look at what's happening in regards to huge events that happen over in Saudi Arabia and the money that's in boxing now. And we can all discuss obviously the politics behind it and all that kind of thing. At science sort of stay out of that kind of stuff. But the sport itself is so big, and it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger for me. And it's great to see the two main promoters in this country, and Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren, come together and get the major fights made, obviously with the help of those within Saudi Arabia in the Riyadh season. So it's a fantastic sport. Obviously, it's a very dangerous sport. I wouldn't get in a boxing ring myself, certainly not. But no, listen, it's fabulous to go to those major events, fabulous to watch it, and to have a few boxes over the last so many sort of say 5-10 years that have really followed around the country as well, which has been great to see.
I'd tell you what, I watched the Steve Collins and Chris Eubank documentary over the last 2 nights because I fell asleep halfway through. That's on Prime. The first fight, when they took it, obviously, to Ireland, I know it went to Cork after as well for the second fight. Absolutely brilliant. And Four Kings as well. I don't know, I'm assuming you've seen that on Prime.
I don't think I have, mate, to be honest with you. I've seen a fair few documentaries. I've seen a lot about this sort of the Eubank, Ben Collins, that kind of era. A lot on Lennox Lewis, Frank Bruno, Tyson. The major sort of heavyweight era as well. There's a lot of stuff out there, of course, for any kind of boxing fans, or just people who like sport and documentaries. I'll watch anything on any kind of sport in terms of documentaries. I haven't got to enjoy the sport itself, but there's a lot of stuff out there, and it does sort of, those people that you mentioned there, obviously Steve Collins, Eubank, obviously Ben. That era, it was absolute carnage, in terms of the actual fights themselves. Totally different here to what we've got now, but. I'm looking forward in a strange way to obviously Eubank Jr. against Conor Benn coming up at the back end of this month, and it's got a lot of needle behind it.
A little bit of needle, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those, isn't it? I was due to go to the first fight until obviously fight week. It was cancelled, wasn't it? Because of the whole drug test debacle with Conor Benn and him eating contaminated eggs. You believe that if you want to, of course. But it's got a lot of spice behind it. Obviously, there's issues between Chris Eubank Jr. and his dad, and there's so much going on with that fight. So it's going to make for a decent fight, and I think when you've got two fellas who want to literally, punch each other's heads off, it makes for an interesting spectacle, doesn't it?
Definitely, and thank God for Turkey Al-Sheikh, Mike. Because all these years where they've pissed about, they've dicked around for years, haven't they, with all this? We're finally getting these fights. I was reading as well, obviously, Bivol wants Beterbiev again, doesn't he? He's relinquished the WBC belt, as well. I was reading today, to make the trilogy fight, which I think is fair enough, isn't it? I think they do need to have a trilogy. What are your thoughts on that before we move on to the football?
Yeah, I think obviously they've had the two fights already. I think the first one could have gone either way, that's for sure. And then the second one, Bivol was certainly for me the clearer winner compared to the first one. They've had the obviously undisputed fights, which is great for the sport when you have one champion in one weight division. But obviously he's relinquished the big one, the main one, the green and gold in the WBC. Totally his choice, and he feels out of respect, I think, for Beterbiev and probably himself as well. He wants to prove that he's the better man and the better boxer. He wants that trilogy fight, and I'm sure there's much more money on the table for that than actually defending the WBC belt. So you've got to take into account, listen, they're getting punched in the face for a living. So I think, the careers are short, they're dangerous. So if you can make the big money, you make the big money. And the biggest fight for him is the third fight with Beterbiev, and, may the best man win. But I think it makes perfect sense from a financial perspective for him, that's for sure. And I'm sure the fans, us fans want to see, obviously, a third fight as well.
Amazing for a third. It'd be great to see that. Chris, anything before we move on to the football with Mike? Some of his moments, nostalgic moments from football? I was
going to say, you've got Paddy fighting this weekend, a massive fight for Paddy the Baddy, Michael Chandler. Obviously, I'm sure you know about Molly McCann. 2 weeks ago, obviously retired. Any thoughts with Paddy? We haven't really spoke about Paddy. I think he wasn't really on the rise as such when we spoke originally first. Do you have anything for him, Mike, or is it just like he's just a cop-out and just too loud for everyone?
Yeah, listen, I'm not heavily into UFC. I used to be. I used to do a little bit of jiu-jitsu back in the day. I used to watch a lot of the UFC and the Ultimate Fighter, the early series, especially with Bisping and people like that. And sort of tailed off. I have picked it up, I think, recently. Since I got TNT Sports back, I thought I'll watch a little bit. I mean, Paddy the Baddy, he's got a character that he plays, of course. Those who saw him in Cage Warriors, I mean, I think I was cage side years ago when he got beat. I can't remember who he was fighting. Was it someone, the Viking? You'll know better than me. And he lost. I think he got choked out in the end. And anyway, he was one of those characters who I think a lot of people love to hate. I think obviously when they're linked to our neighbours across the park as well, somebody who supports them, I tend to not take them to heart, so to speak, and I can take him or leave him. Listen, he's a character. He's built his brand, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? You've got to try and make money. You've got to do something a bit different, and that's exactly what he's doing. Do I think, in my limited knowledge of mixed martial arts, that he's the best in the world? Probably not. Do I think he'll win a world title? Probably not. But if he can get out and he's made money, then I'm sure for him, like going back to the boxing, you try and make as much money as you can in such a short and dangerous career, then go ahead and do it.
That's spot on, and I think that goes with, as you say, with boxers. Anyone who does combat sports, it is get in, get out as quick as possible without any getting any health problems in between it. I follow him because I like me and Stu when we did Big Fight Weekly. I mean, we were quite biased actually towards the Brits, weren't we, Stu?
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's just us. Like I do appreciate fighters from all the countries, but I feel like when you're watching combat sports, you have to follow your own. I mean, you can see the difference when you watch them in America to when you see them in the UK, and we do as a country follow our own, vigorously, don't we? So, yeah, well, that's this weekend. Let's get to the football because this is why we're here.
Absolutely. Obviously, spoke to you before our mic. Put a few topics to you so we could get some photos in, assisting what you're going to be talking about, of course. I thought this was brilliant because I said about La Liga, Serie A back in the 90s, into the 2000s. Me and Chris watched both, as you did as well. But Sampdoria and Genoa's stadium, you talked about the Stadio Luigi Ferraris and the World Cup in 1990. There was 4 games at the stadium. But yeah, just your memories of an iconic looking stadium and why you liked it so much, Sampdoria Stadium.
It's just so different, really, isn't it? You look at football stadiums around the world, and we're lucky enough. And I'll always try and get back to Everton, of course, my favourite subject. We're lucky enough to have a fabulous new stadium. The brickwork at Bramley-Moore is something which is totally different. It's sympathetic to the landscape in the area that it's in. You look at obviously the stadium there for both Genoa and Sampdoria. I always remember watching Football Italia back in the day, and you see the brick internally, in each corner. It's just something which is just totally different. And I don't know why it was. It was just seeing those angles from different parts of the ground. And obviously you see the corners of each of those stands. And it's just so different. You just don't see it, do you? Especially now as we sort of progress and we move forward and time goes on. You look at stadiums and new stadiums, especially, not so much obviously Everton's new stadium, but I think, you're more sort of, as people like to refer to them, soulless bowls, those stadiums with very little in the way of character. It gets a little bit the same, doesn't it? You look at a lot of the stadiums that were built sort of early 2000s, I always look at Leicester and the Riverside Stadium, obviously with Middlesbrough, the Majeski Stadium for Reading. Those kind of stadiums, they all look very, very similar. And I like stadiums. That's why we love Goodison Park. The character within Goodison Park, 4 effectively different stands. One which is 3 tiers, the third three-tier football stand in the world. And, you look at that and you look at what you see in obviously the Sampdoria and Genoa Stadium. And it just takes you back to that time, when Sundays, Football Italia comes on. You get a game or two on the Sunday and the Sunday afternoon as well. And at a time when, there was no social media, there was no access to YouTube, there was no chance to actually watch any games or highlights at any time of the day whenever you wanted to. It was very much, you had 4 or 5 television channels and what was on. And if you were in and you got to watch it live, then great. And it was just a simpler time, potentially a better time. And it just takes me back to watching, as I say, Football Italia, seeing the players like George Weah, for example, in his pomp for AC Milan. A lot of English players went over there. You remember Gazak, obviously, at Lazio. Paul Ince was over there, wasn't he, as well, of course. David Platt was over there. You just think back, Ray Wilkins, he was at Sampdoria, I think, wasn't he, for a time. It was just a really, really simple time. But, because English players going abroad, a bit more prevalent now, of course, but leagues were not awash with obviously players from different countries. It was very much a case of if you were an English club, vast majority were English or British players. Players coming from different countries was unheard of as well, wasn't it? So getting to see other countries and their football and their top division as well, it was a massive treat as well. But that stadium just stands out because it's just so different than any other stadium in Italy and obviously in this country as well.
It's the oldest stadium in Italy as well now. Well, it probably has been for years. 1911 it was initially built. I was reading up a little bit. I was swatting up, and then between 87 and 89, before the World Cup, they renovated it. It then got renovated in 2015 and again in 2018. I don't know if that was to do with UEFA, if they were in Europe and stuff like that. To be right, doesn't it? It has to be for him to have it, has to be accredited, doesn't it? But major just the amount of time. But yeah, the oldest stadium in Italy.
Says it all. Probably why I like it so much, because of obviously the age of Goodison Park. We're used to obviously the age look, that's for sure, but it's certainly massively different to anything that you're likely to see. I think thinking back to when you used to play games sort of Pro Evolution Soccer or FIFA and things like that back in the day, and it was on there. You could remember seeing it on there as well. It was always a bit of a favourite of mine to go to. It's just funny how certain grounds sort of stand out to you. But no, it's a lovely stadium, and hopefully, they remain there. Them obviously generous Sampdoria for many years to come.
I've got to just bring one man up here as well, because our Saturday mornings, where he was a part of the fixtures and fittings. This man, James Richardson, of course, still going strong. He's got the Totally Football podcast that he does, which is probably my favourite one out of the professional journalists that do the football ones. We've got to take Unholy Trinity out of there, because it is my favourite Everton one. Okay, you're there, you are there, you know that. And Chris obviously put me, in the direction of the Unholy Trinity podcast. So I listened to it in its entirety. But James Richardson, al fresco with the papers on a Saturday morning, espresso, maybe a croissant. Just your memories of James Richardson, and still going strong now.
Yeah, of course, and you do always think back, the start of football. It's he'd be there with his paper, with his espresso, and all the headlines, obviously from Italian football, the major news. Again, we didn't get to see it, we didn't get to hear about it, because there was no internet, there was no mobile phones, no Sky Sports app, whatever it might be. So you didn't get the opportunity to actually find a lot of things out. You were very reliant on these kind of magazine shows, so to speak, to find out what's going on, and see obviously how the league's panning out, how the league table looks, who's playing who's beating who, and quite often you were waiting from the previous weekend to find out results and what's the highlight. So he was a fabulous host, very much in a nice laid back style, and within the culture of Italy as well. Outside of a cafe within a city square, or on a lovely little street corner. The weather was always nice, wasn't it? And it looked like a lovely lifestyle as well, very sort of laid back. And again, it's a different culture, and it grabs you, because obviously what we were used to was a mug of tea and a bacon butty watching the footy, whereas you got this civilized man, suit on, broadsheet newspaper, obviously Italian paper, nice little bit of coffee early in the morning, and it was a totally different thing. But yeah, fabulous show. And I think by the time they got to the end of it, I think he'd lost all his hair, hadn't he? So, that shows how long it was going for.
Too much of a good time.
Sorry, Chris. I'll let you get in a minute. I'd say him and Gaza. Yeah, they call them vignettes in the wrestling game, where they do the promotional stuff and all that. Him and Gaza together doing bits, as part, as you say, the magazine show and that. I used to love it. And he was the bridge, Gaza, as well. I know a lot of Brits went before him. He had Luther Blissett over there, didn't you? And players like that. Rush obviously went to Juventus, didn't he? But Gaza going off the back of the World Cup and all that, it was him and Gaza together were brilliant, I thought.
Yeah, and like you say, that sort of magazine style show, it was bringing in, wasn't it? Before we had, like to say, Soccer AM over here, for example, which was a little bit more sort of comedy based, but sort of going out to and doing sketches or doing recordings and clips with current professional footballers, or bring them into the studio and having a chat with them. That was the start of us seeing that kind of thing, really. And like you say, Gaza was the bridge. A huge player in this country. Obviously went across and signed for Lazio. Obviously a massive character. And somebody that, after obviously Italia 90 especially, he was loved by the majority of the country as well. So he obviously helped things. Obviously you mentioned earlier, obviously Paul Ince was over there. You had people before that. Obviously we mentioned Platt, and it was Mark Haitley was over there for a time. Was it AC Milan, wasn't he? You mentioned Luther Blissett. There's been so many players over the years that have gone over there. But Gaza was the one he really, which probably sucked people in, and which probably made that show as successful as it was.
Definitely. Chris, do you want to go into the Spanish side? Because I was obviously more Italy. You were Spain when we were kids. So obviously we're going to talk about Revista de la Liga and Sky's coverage. So jump in,
I was going to bring up a point. Obviously, when you said like George Weah, and funny enough, he was one of my favourite players growing up, George Weah. Just it was what he could do with a ball. And I had these videotapes back in the 90s, and it like showed you like certain players scoring goals, and then it replicated it for you to learn. Not how I'm going to do these things living on a tight street, with houses that blooming close to each other without breaking a front window. No, I never did that, did I, Stu? But one of them that obviously this is before I even knew who George Weah was, and it showed the goal against Verona in, I think it was 98, wasn't it? When he ran the length of the field and then, popped it in at the end. I remember just seeing that and it blowing my mind because, in the Premier League, you just never saw a player run from one side of the pitch to the other, and still manage to finish a goal. And I remember being blown away by it. And then I was very keen on following George Weah after that. I thought he was, absolutely fantastic. Shadowed himself when he came to the Premier League. He was getting on, when he went to Man City and Chelsea. But it was still good to see him, in the English leagues. But what were your best memories of George Weah?
I think that goal was always the one, wasn't it? I think if you mention George Weah's name, everybody automatically thinks about that goal because I think he put it on the start of football. That's how you did he as well. And I think football back then, and he was probably the epitome of it in terms of players who were playing playing abroad, is the freedom. You had these flair players, didn't you? You think back to your Maradonas, for example. He was obviously a little bit earlier. You think about players like him, and you think about players obviously like George Weah. You think about the proper Ronaldo, for example. Those kind of players who played football with an immense freedom. And I think now, there's a lot of talk now about, Guardiola, for example, at Man City and how he sort of suffocates the game in terms of the style of football. Is it effective? Yes, it's been effective for years, but I think it's easy to be effective when you've got as much money as you want to spend, at your fingertips. Is it boring to watch? Yes, it's boring. I mean, we saw at Goodison Park last weekend with Arsenal. Similar, maybe a little bit more freedom in terms of the players got a little bit more license because I know Guardiola was very, very structured. But all this possession-based sort of passing for passing sake nonsense, sometimes you just think, just give it to X player and let him go and do something. I think Jack Grealish being killed at Man City, a player who Aston Villa, obviously he was the main man, but he had a license to do whatever he wanted. And George Weah was one of those players. Listen, I'm sure the manager's message to him was, if you get the ball, just do what you want to do. Simple as that. And I think that's what football needs to get back to in a way. There's room for and there's space for the Man City way and the Arsenal way, but there's plenty of space for what do we like about? I always call them seat clickers. Iliman and Dies a seat clicker for Everton. As soon as you get to the ball, you're off on your feet. Aren't you? George Weah was that kind of player. Ronaldinho was that kind of player. Rivaldo. These are the players we all remember. We don't remember that with the best will in the world in 20, 25 years' time. And as good as he is, by the way, will I sit there and think, what? One of the best players in my era was Rodri. No, I won't. I think about who got me off my seat. Even if it was an opposition player and you watch them and they entertained you, you should be big enough to say, there's some talents, aren't they? Look at that. They entertain you. If you watch it on the telly, you want to watch particular players. Those players are sort of dying out for these mechanical, robotic players. But take me back to, as I say, the Ronaldinhos who come on to Spanish football, obviously, in a minute. What a player that he was. You look at him and he just played for the love of the game.
And the liver parties.
Of course, yeah, but a different time, wasn't it? Adriano's another one, and Inter Milan. What a player that he was. Loved the ale, loved the party, loved women. But at the end of the day, he was an absolute joy to watch, wasn't he? They're the kind of players that we think back. Mavericks of the game, and there's not enough of them anymore, is there? And I think we need to get back to that. But George Weah, as you say, we came to the Premier League for a short period at Chelsea, but that time at AC Milan, the goals that he was scoring, won World Football of the Year, didn't he, as well, when he was there, an absolute pleasure to watch. And they're the players, we think younger people nowadays, sort of, teenagers, 10, 11, 12, a bit younger again, and they don't watch football. Now, that's what we did. We watched football and we played football. That was what we did. Nowadays, kids still play football in the seven-a-sides and they go up to 9s, 11s, whatever it might be. But do they sit down over a weekend and religiously watch football highlights, live football? They don't, because there's too much of it and it's saturated. But they haven't got the players that they wanted to aspire to be anymore. The likes of sort of like a Mo Salah at Liverpool, for example. He's a player that people will look at and go, he's entertaining, isn't he? I mean, he cheats and he dies and all that, but he's entertaining. He carries the ball, he scores goals. But they're the players that people and youngsters really want to be watching and be getting entertained by. But it's stifled now in the current football and its current guys, in my opinion.
Imagine George Weah wasn't Liberian, because they weren't up there with the likes of Cameroon and Nigeria in the tournaments and stuff like that. Imagine he was Cameroonian or Nigerian, because at club level in France, and even when he came, he played for City as well briefly. I've nearly forgot until I jogged my memory back about it. But if he'd have played for one of the other African nations, could they have gone further than a quarter final? Because you always say about the African teams in the World Cup, don't they? With him, as the focal point.
Of course, I mean, look at the Nigeria side in and around '94. Obviously, was it '96 Olympics when did they win the gold medal? I think in Atlanta, down Amakachi, for example. He played for them. Obviously, Carney was coming through. Imagine putting George Weah even a bit later into that kind of side. It would have been unbelievable. Obviously, it's all about exposure, about the quality of player around you, and like you say, obviously the country that he played for, he didn't have that exposure, didn't have the talent around them. So imagine what levels he could have took himself to, with being surrounded by even better players on the international stage as well. But for me, the best African player of all time. There's no question.
I'm not going to argue with you. You talk about, obviously, George Weah there. He was, he's Libyan, wasn't he? But he was very loyal to Libya, wasn't he? Heads by that, he got into politics, didn't he? And I think he was like their kind of like president for some point in time. I'm not sure if he still is, but he's just one of those sort of old school people where they were very, very loyal to the country they were, born in. I think he probably, if push comes to shove, if he looked at it football sense wise, he probably had family in other African nations that he could have probably joined instead of staying loyal to Libya. But I think he was just that type of person, wasn't he? That that he was extremely a loyalist to his country.
I'm just looking at time. Time here, because obviously we wanted to touch upon Spain, of course.
Yeah.
And Mike had said to me yesterday, he'd sent in some Real Madrid players that he used to love watching as well. And I've got graphics to come in as well. And Chris, you were megally fond of the Spanish league. You watched it more than me. I'd watched it at your house with my... but Mike, the players you brought up yesterday for Real Madrid, and I've got the photos here.
Yeah, listen, there was some absolute quality there. Look at that there. Was it Salgado, Raul, and Guti? Guti was, by the way, what an underappreciated footballer he was.
Amazing player.
But what a side they had, and you look at that. Obviously, even going back, you look from before that photograph. Obviously, you had Ronaldo there, which obviously incredible. You had even a sort of Seedorf a bit early, didn't that? Obviously, McManaman was there for a while in a very good Real Madrid side. Zinedine Zidane, fabulous footballer. David Beckham goes over there and takes it to a new level again in terms of his brand, and obviously having English fans watching Spanish football at a time when Sky started to really take off, and it got the Revista de la Liga. It also got the live coverage as well. And they were following around David Beckham. Not so much Jonathan Woodgate. His time there wasn't particularly good.
What a debut!
But, fabulous side, and you think back to playing like Championship Manager and things like that, and you go in Real Madrid and the players that they had at the disposal. Even likes of Hierro back in the day as well. Fabulous captain, fabulous footballer. Great over here actually for Bolton Wanderers, if you remember. Ivan Campo, another one. Real Madrid, Bolton Wanderers. They just had one of those sides, at a time when, again, you're growing up with football, but you don't really get the exposure to foreign leagues. So to be able to see different sides in Spain play on a weekly basis, even from a highlight perspective, whether it be Real Madrid, Barcelona, Real Mallorca, obviously with Samuel Eto'o, former Everton player, of course. Valencia had obviously a good few years. Deportivo La Coruña with Roy Mackay, what a player that he was. There were so many good sides. The Nielsen signing for Real Betis.
That's amazing. I remember that, Mike. Sorry to butt in. I remember that like it was yesterday, and I was in love with Brazilian players because there was something different back in those days in the early 90s, mid 90s, and Danielson was someone I truly loved at Real Betis. Obviously, after that, it kind of fell down for him. But as you say, he moved Real Betis to another level as well.
Yeah, of course. And he went with the world record transfer at the time, I think, wasn't it?
15 million, I think it was.
Yeah. So when a player signs for a world record fee, automatically the eyes of the footballing world are upon that player and that team. So it brought a lot with it, like you say. It just seems to go downhill for him, really, didn't it? It didn't really happen, didn't really take off, and his career didn't really take off. But yeah, I think there's been so many big players who've gone through that league, as have obviously with the Premier League. But you look at the likes of they've had the best player of all time there in Lionel Messi. He's the best player of all time. It's as simple as that. Probably closely followed by the likes of Maradona. Obviously, you spent a bit of time over there, but it's just, I think the Liga is even now, I think is an enjoyable league to watch. You still get that intensity and that pace. Obviously, the top two are the top two, aren't they? And that's the kind of thing I think with all leagues that you want to look to try and look at that and get it being a little bit more competitive. But Atletico, sort of on the coattails, aren't they? They tend to push now most years. But fabulous to watch that league and those players at that particular time. As I say, it came when Sky was really taking off. And obviously, we were saying yesterday, Stu, obviously Rob Palmer presented, and you had Guillaume Balaguer, which you saw at Goodison Park the other day, actually in a fabulous Hawaiian shirt before the Arsenal match, and Jerry Armstrong on commentary as well, co-commentary. So it was look at him there, looking the part, isn't he? Nice bit of slick back gelled hair. So he looks fabulous there, Jerry. But his voice was synonymous with Spanish football. You remember it. I think he spent some of his career over there, didn't he? And obviously, did he score against Spain, didn't he, for Northern Ireland in the World Cup? So another little link there. But great show, fabulous. It got all these kind of shows, Football Italia, Rivista de la Liga, all those kind of shows improved your football knowledge, didn't they? As well as enjoying watching the football, your knowledge of football around Europe improved. So the only time you really got to see these sides was when it was Champions League and it was on ITV. Yeah. And you'd see these sides come over to sort of Highbury or Old Trafford or whatever it might have been. But it improved your knowledge of players. So when your club were bringing players in, sometimes you'd have the chance to actually see them yourself. So all these things, they helped, I think, enormously when it came to just broaden your horizons in terms of European football.
Definitely. Like you say, it's just, like you say, the oversaturation when you think about it and you bringing it up. You said to me in the email yesterday, it was a treat. It really was a treat for us, we were young lads following it, and we wanted to know. You wanted to be encyclopedic with it, didn't you? You needed to know every facet of the leagues. It was just brilliant time, nostalgic, and the players were better back then, Mike. I'm with you. Me and Chris have said it on this show many a time. You're 100% right. The football was better. The football was miles better.
But do you know what though? Obviously, we say that the players were better. They're probably not. They're just allowed to express themselves. That's the difference for me. I think technically they're no better, no worse. I mean, you probably argue now that there's better players technically, but in terms of, as I said earlier on, having the Mavericks and having the players who were trusted to basically do whatever they want to impact the game and bring enjoyment, probably more importantly to the paying public. they're gone, and there are some in the game, but like I say, they get stifled by modern tactics. And how would a Ronaldinho manage in the current climate? How would a Ronaldo manage? Even the likes of Danielson, if he could have his time again, how would he manage in the current climate? If you bring him into the Premier League now, and you said that you're playing for Man City, you're playing for Arsenal or whatever it might be. And that'd be a real struggle. And I know times change and things move on, and things are so data-driven now. But there should always be room for entertainment, in my opinion, and that's what we've lost, I think, over the years.
Definitely. Chris?
I completely agree. And as you said about, kids now would always look at, your Messis, Ronaldos, your Haalands. I feel like we grew up with a wide range of players that I feel like in my eyes, are more respected for what they did, and it wasn't just always the flashy stuff. They played as a team, didn't they? And and I think one player, Stuart, you'll know instantly, that made me fall in love with Spanish league and La Liga, and I was a massive fan as a kid. Mike, was Romario, and obviously he played for Barca. And as a kid, obviously this is way before we got to watch the La Liga, and we were in Barcelona as a family, and obviously I knew who Romario was from the 1994 World Cup. I think that's what obviously tuned my brain into him. And I had a Romario on the back of my Barcelona top. I think it was a fake one. I don't think it was one of the older proper ones. But everyone loved a good fake kit in Spain back in the day. And and that really sort of changed my mindset, because it was all Everton and the English leagues. And then once I started obviously understanding football better, going abroad and seeing these players on TV, it changed completely the aspect of football for me. And just I fell in love a lot more for La Liga through probably the late 90s than watching Everton at times, because I was just fascinated over certain players and the certain styles of these teams going up against the likes of Real and Barca and really pushing them. You say about Deportivo La Coruña, and in the early 2000s, they didn't have the most expensive players, but they had a really good team unit, and it showed you when Stuart spoke about our Champions League moments, and when they woke Milan up and absolutely thrashed him. And this is a Milan that had Kaká, and Inzaghi and all that in there. But the love for Spanish football wasn't just flair. It was just, I loved the sort of dynamic and how they did it. And I just obviously I fell in love, and then I got to obviously know more players as I went along. And yeah, it just, like I said, it changed the outlook of football for me, because it wasn't as brutal as as we'd say it in the British leagues, it's the tackling, isn't it? They're very strong with the tackling and X, Y, Z. But in Spain, you just watched it and it was just beautiful football.
Yeah, and I think as well, that one of the big things, the difference between obviously Spanish football and English football is that camera angle as well. How high the cameras were and how much more of the pitch you actually see. So even now, I think it's exactly the same. You see a lot more of the pitch when it comes to watching Spanish football than you do English football. It's a bit more like, did you say, a bit more like a FIFA kind of view. And that was also something a little bit different, because you were getting to see players sort of out of possession a little bit more, what they were doing in terms of their movements, and if a side was pushing up, how the defenders moved out and all that. And I quite enjoy at Everton sitting in the top balcony. So before I have my season tickets, I quite often go up there, because I like to see what's happening. I'm a new season ticket is nice and high up in the southeast corner at Everton Stadium, so I'm going to get to see it again, because I like to see not to say that the tactical side of the game, but it gives you a much better vantage point of sort of what players do in possession, out of possession, and also who's shaking as well, which is also quite important. But that was Spanish football for me, is remembering the high television angle and getting to see that bit more of the pitch as well was always, I think, quite different and quite interesting.
Brilliant.
I'm sorry, but I remember when we stayed at Nana's when we lived in Park Road, and our house was getting done up, and we were putting radiators in and stuff. So obviously we had to move out for a couple of nights. And for some reason, my older siblings went to Stuart's, and I went to my nana's. Made no sense, obviously, back then, because me and Stuart literally did everything together. And I was always questioning him, why am I here at my nana's? But I remember United versus Barca. And my nana had one, and I remember the very small tellies, and well, Stuart will know.
The portable. It was
Yeah.
a 14-inch portable Philips, and I had the same one, and I think you had one at your house.
Sonic one I had.
On like Radio Rentals or White's is the local firm where you used to rent your TV and pay for it weekly.
But I remember because obviously Romario was in that game, and obviously, like I said, I followed him, and I think that's what obviously I always say to people. I loved Barca before Barca became this like unusual word here, Stuart, sexy team. But I remember, like, you know, I think it was Koeman. Basically, Barca beat United. I remember my nana coming in, and now she's she was a red. And I remember coming up to me and she going, Christopher, why are you supporting Spanish teams? And I'll be like, because I love Barca, you know what I mean? And they were like my second team back then. And I loved all the players that played there. And she's like, you should be supporting English teams. Never support anything else other than the English teams when they're in a European Cup. And I was like, no. I was like, I prefer watching different styles, and I watch United week in, week out, you know, where you don't get to see Barcelona week in, week out. And she couldn't get her head around it, and then she just walked off. And I think she went and said that I needed sorting out to my mother, like, you know. But that moment always remembers things.
Notwithstanding, we had Scoria on S4C over here in Wales. So we got Bundesliga, we got La Liga, and we got Italy on there as well. So it was like in an hour. But obviously, you had the Welsh commentary, and we were doing Welsh second language in our schools, Mike. But we had Scoria. So you could see the Bundesliga as well. Quite incredible before Dortmund's ground got done up and all that, you know. Just amazing when you look back. It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, no, it was, and you know, you look back and nostalgia, I think, is a fabulous thing. There's always a place for it. It always takes you back, and I think with us leaving Goodison Park, I think nostalgia is at the forefront of everyone's mind currently as well. We're going to our current home and trying to take it all in and thinking about memories and, you know, what happened against certain sides and what your first game was and what your last game was going to be. A lot of people have been to the last game at Goodison Park, and I think, you know, you always link things back. I know I do. I link everything back in life to football, but more importantly to Everton and who were playing and what the result was. And I can think back where I was. You know, I remember the day before I got married, Everton beat Burnley by 3-1. Eto'o scored 2. And I remember all kind of things to what Everton has done. So I think nostalgia serves a real purpose. And I think when you think back to growing up and having that exposure to Italian football, Spanish football, probably later on for us, the Bundesliga as well. It was simpler times, as I say, potentially better times, but also it was great just to see different brands of football, different kind of flair players, different tactics, different countries, different cultures, and you know, that's now taken for granted, because if you want to watch it, you can watch it. It's at your fingertips. You know, I want to put it on YouTube. You know, you got Sky Sports, you got TNT, you got obviously you got Twitter, you got Facebook, you got Instagram. It's all over there. Whereas back in our day, it was very much, as I say, it was on the telly. You couldn't, you know, unless you had a VHS and you wanted to record it. Oh, yeah. If it was on, you watched it. If you missed it, you missed it. You got to wait till next week. Yeah. But no, for great times and growing up and with both those leagues, both those sort of magazine shows to sort of educate us a little bit more.
Mike, we're going to have to get you back on to talk some more nostalgia, mate, because we could have covered the gamut today. If we had 2 hours, it probably wouldn't have been enough. But just before we go, of course, the Unholy Trinity Podcast and Everton Podcast, you and the two lads do such a great job. I listen every week. Chris obviously got me in the loop with your show. Just before we go, where we can find you, where the show is, etc., etc. And just a fantastic show. You do such a good job, you and the lads.
No, much appreciated. As I say, it's been 6 years now, so it's been quite a long-standing show. I don't think we thought it would go on for as long as it has, and I don't think we've had many interesting or exciting times in those 6 years, but it's been fun nonetheless. But no, we're across obviously all your major podcasting platforms, obviously Spotify and Apple being the two main ones. You'll find us obviously on social media, on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. Also on Blue Sky, on Instagram, on Facebook. We're always on there. So come on, speak to us. Obviously, leave comments. Listen, if anyone wants to jump on, Evertonians, and you're fairly sensible is the most important thing. You're not a raving lunatic, and you can get your points across pretty well. Then we'll have you on.
Well, you let me on, so that was all right.
Yeah, Chris got on. So Chris is like is like the yardstick in terms of what we accept, what's acceptable as a guest. So if you take your lead from Chris, but no, listen, it's we appreciate obviously anyone who listens to us, and we enjoy doing what we do. But by all means, check us out. That's for sure.
Thank you very much. And also, we're both part of the Sports Social Podcast Network. Let's do a pause for the cause before I forget. Fantastic 550 podcasts now. We had the graphic for 500. They're now on 550 shows. All sorts of sports, F1, rugby. I know Joe Marler's shows on there. Under the Cosh are on there. They're fantastic, have been for a long time. So, yeah, big thank you to them for all their support. I know Mike always says about the Sports Social Podcast Network on his show as well. And, yeah, just thanks to them.
Yeah, fabulous network, the biggest sports podcast network in Europe. I think they are now. Like you were saying, a massive range of shows from different sports, different backgrounds, from ex-players from different sports to people like ourselves who are just fans of particular sports, and obviously getting shows out as regular as we can. So make sure you go onto their homepage. I think it's sportssocial.co.uk, I think, and all the podcasts are on there for you to have a little look at.
Perfect. Chris, anything before we close?
No, I haven't got anything else. Other than probably, actually, I'll say to you, Mike, before we end it, because obviously we won't get this. I doubt we'll speak face to face now till probably come next season. Your favourite moment of Goodison ever from going?
Horrible. Listen, I've been there for some horrible times in terms of relegation. The last day decided is the most recent one being Bournemouth. Obviously, a couple of years ago, we've obviously had Wimbledon, etc. But I think in terms of my favourites of all time, I always go back to that Arteta goal against Fiorentina. Always go back to, as much as we lost on penalties, I was right behind it, and the noise in the stadium that night when that goal went in was unbelievable. I think it's potentially being matched in recent times, but I just think that goal, that side, David Moyes is back now, of course, which is great for us. He's done a good job since he's come back in. But that side, we all sorts of we're so closely connected. There was a bond between players and fans. We thought we were onto something. We thought we were going to be successful. We should have been successful in Moyes' first 11 years. Of course, we should have had some real quality there. But that goal, when it hit the back of the net, was just incredible. And how we didn't go through that night, I'll never, ever know. Because I think if we did, we win it. I've always thought that. But yeah, it's got to be that goal for me. And, watch it back. Look at the crowd on the Gladys Street. Look at the reactions to the goal. Fabulous goal as well, by the way.
Yeah.
But for me, that really sticks out, I think.
I remember that, yeah. I'm picturing it in my head as you're speaking about it. And I wasn't there for the game. I watched it on Channel 5, I think, had it back then, the UEFA Cup. And I thought we absolutely battered Fiorentina in that game. Just couldn't get that, the third goal to go through without going to penalties. And I think it was Sebastian Fry that was in goal for Fiorentina. And he made some worldy saves for them, to keep them in the game, because we were knocking at that door, if not trying to break it down, trying to get that third goal. Obviously, it's unsuccessfully because we're a bit like England when it comes to penalties, if I'm honest with you. I know we won a few now, but we were dreadful at penalties.
Every time went to penalties, you never thought that we were going to go through. Never did, and that was one of those games, wasn't it? And hopefully, that we can get beyond that now. But we're just open, to get back to those days when we got European football. Obviously now not at Goodison Park, it'll be at Everton Stadium. We've got a great platform now to build on with these new owners, of course. We've got David Moyes back at the club, which is going to be probably 18 months, 2 years of rebuilding. and getting the squad to a certain level for someone else to come in and take it on from there. But we want to be getting back into Europe. We want those European nights back. We want to be back at the top end of the table. It's as simple as that.
Definitely. And again, a big test for us on the weekend away at Forest. I think a good time. The players, he's getting the players back in, isn't he? People are trying to get to fitness. So it's a good time. I think it'd be a good test for us. Not sure how long Chris Wood's out for, but again, it's been Elanga, Gibbs, White, and Hudson-Odoi. I think they've been brilliant, but they've been solid at the back as well. And the keeper, Sells, has been brilliant. Milenkovic has been good as well, hasn't he? Murillo. Aine is injured, and I think he's out longer than they anticipated. But I think we can go there and give them a game,
Good side, they're third in the table currently. They're pretty much, you'd say, nailed on for European football. I mean, the top 5 now get Champions League football this season in the Premier League, so they've got a great chance of getting that. I think watching them against Villa last week, you thought at 2-0 down they were done, and they come back and they got back to 2-1, and really, they could have taken something from the game. But good side, they showed that at Goodison Park. Obviously, we weren't as probably as effective as we are now, because we had the previous manager there and we were struggling a little bit. But yeah, it's a tricky trip to Nottingham at the weekend. I'll be there. I look forward to that. Being there once in the past myself, and it's not the ties, the football grounds, but the atmosphere is always good, which is a good thing. But we're playing with no pressure. We're relaxed. There's nothing on it for us. We're safe as houses. We're going nowhere. We've got a little battle now to see who can finish, above who in terms of United, Tottenham, ourselves, and West Ham. That's our battle. But there's no pressure on us whatsoever. Whereas, do Forest now start to feel the pressure, the fact that they've got to keep on picking up points and pretty much winning when they've got the likes of City, Chelsea, Newcastle, and Villa on the tails. I think experience tells for a lot, and they haven't been here for a long time. So we can take advantage of that. We're getting players back. There's more competition for places. So let's see what happens. Anything can happen, and I fancy just to go there and certainly get something from the game.
Definitely. And hopefully we can get a win after all the draws. But again, he's averaging 1.5 points a game, Moisey. Obviously earlier on, we were going like the clappers, weren't we? We won all them games after the Villa loss. But Dyche was, I think it was 0.89 points a game. So he's done He's done absolutely brilliant. And it'll be interesting to see who goes in the summer. There's a lot of contracts coming up, isn't it? There's loans coming up. So yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed, we can get up the table, Mike.
Yeah, it's important. It's important from a money perspective. For us, obviously, we're much more stable now than we were, but every place is worth so many more millions of pounds. So you want to be finishing as high as you possibly can. We know we're going to be a much more of an attractive proposition for any players come this summer. When you go, the first thing that you do is you take them down to Everton Stadium and you say, "You want to play every other week? Come and sign for us." And it's a massive factor. I've been there twice myself already. Unbelievable. And when it's full, it's going to be an absolute another level than any other stadium in this country. And I can say it, whether I'm being biased or what, it will be the best atmosphere in the loudest stadium in this country by a country mile. Because
I think Stu would definitely agree with you there, Mike.
Listen, the way it's being built, the noise is just going to stay in. It's just going to stay in. And, let the players give us something to shout about and get behind. That's the most important thing. But exciting times now for our football club, and we need to grasp it. We've blown it once already when Farhad Mashiri came in. We can't afford to blow it for a second time with the Freakins at the helm, but they seem to be sensible. They seem to be good businessmen. They've got a fabulous side in Roma in terms of how they've progressed. Won the first European Sophie for many years. A couple of years ago under Jose Mourinho. They're now back at that, fighting for European places. So listen, they want to see success at our football club as much as we do. But we've got a great chance, a great platform to do it now, and every place matters. So for me, let's finish as high as possible. Let's give Goodison Park the swan song that she deserves, and let's enjoy the last few weeks of the season.
The perfect crescendo there, Mike. The perfect crescendo on the up. after all this diabolical stuff since Ancelotti went, it's been abysmal. But again, yeah, the only way is up surely now, and we need to be up there. You're looking at Brentford, Bournemouth, Brighton teams. No disrespect, and Brighton have done brilliantly, and the ownership and all that. I'm not knocking them, but we need to be up there. We need to be up there. We're a bigger club historically. We're still a massive player. On paper, it's all there. The fundamentals are there, aren't they? Now, hopefully, they can, because we've got left behind. That's the problem I've got. I'm not giving off about Bournemouth. They've been brilliant, but the vitality, it's we're bigger. We're a bigger club. That's what's been getting us down, I think.
That's without question. The size of our football club. I think it was Marco Silva who said a couple of weeks ago. He said you don't realise the size of the football club until you're in the football club. The expectations. Sometimes as football fans, we have expectations that are too high. I think sometimes we maybe live too much in the past, and we think back to the 1980s when we had probably the best side in Europe. We didn't get the opportunity, unfortunately, to play in the European Cup. But, that side was unbelievable. And a lot of our fans lived through those years. I mean, me personally, I was only born mid-80s, so I don't remember it. But people will always go back to that and thinking about obviously how successful we were and how successful we could have gone on to be as well. But I think you have to temper your expectations, but it doesn't mean that you have to accept, blatant mediocrity and less than that, which is what's been going on in recent years. We can understand why we were where we were. We can understand the difficult time that Sean Dyche had, for example, and how much the club was on the bones of its backside. But I think, as Everton Football Club, we've won 9 league titles, we won 5 FA Cups. We're a massive football club in this country. It's time that we got back to the days of competing. It's times that we remembered who we actually are. And it's also time for us to get that respect back. I think that we've lost over many, many years, and what an opportunity to do it. Best stadium in the country, the good owners, money, and a real blank canvas to sort of start from in the summer. It's going to be a big rebuild. A lot of players, from 13 players out of contract, loan deals ending, whatever it might be. Massive chance though, and for me, I'm excited to see where we go.
Definitely. And enjoy it up in Nottingham, of course. And then just 3 more home games, Mike. Can't buy a ticket, but we're going on a stadium tour, aren't we, Chris, on May the 7th?
That's our goodbye,
I can't not go without not going in the Grand Old Lady again. So we're booked. We're booked because tickets are just... I could have had one on Saturday morning at 8 o'clock. A lad I know up that way, he's like Runcorn. Gutted I couldn't go. It was just too last minute. He had tickets in the Lower Gladys, but we're going on our tour, aren't we, Chris?
Well, I mean, I would have preferred to said, goodbye properly and go to a match. My last one was Arsenal when we lost when Trossard scored, and I don't really want to leave Goodison, on a loss, but it is what it is. As Stuart says, the tickets are just. Everyone's thinking the same, aren't they? Unless you're a season ticket holder, everyone wants to get in there before we go. But yeah, going on the tour. I mean, we've never done the tour, which is weird, Stuart. I always said to you when we were talking about it, why have we never done it? But yeah, if this has got to be the way we say goodbye to, the grand old lady. Then I'm happy to do it.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it's a good way of doing it for those who can't get a ticket. Like you say, three games left. 2 of those have now got on sale and sold out in City and Ipswich. I'm missing Ipswich myself personally because I'm away. But obviously I'll be there as a season ticket holder. I'm lucky the fact that I haven't got this stress of trying to get scrape around for home tickets. It's been, I think, since West Ham at home when that was the first time I know people found it really hard, and they've been to every game this season and couldn't get a ticket for West Ham from then onwards. It's been nearly impossible for people who are members to get tickets, which is wrong. Something's gone on. I've got my theories. Friends of mine have got their theories of what's gone on. But the club really, I think, should have done a bit better with things. But listen, the demand is going to massively outstrip the number of tickets, which is understandable. But I'm looking forward in a way to that final home game. I think it's going to be an emotional one for a lot of people. It's going to be, hopefully we close the doors on a win, which is really important. But also what they plan to do after the game as well. I think it'll give us all the opportunity to spend a bit more time in there, enjoy Goodison Park and say goodbye, and also reminisce with, I'm sure, a lot of former players as well who are going to be there on the day, and who knows who else. A lot of rumours going around who's going to be there, but it's right to go. It's as sad as it might be, and it's going to be a big change in terms of our routine, our match day routine. It's going to change for everybody. I think a lot of people are ready to go. I think it sort of is almost the signal of a new era by going to a brand new stadium, and Goodison Park has been great for many, not so good for others. And I think it's, as I say, it's the right time to move on, although it's still going to be very, very strange going to a home match day and not going the way that I go now. So yeah, going to be strange, isn't it? But it's the most sought after tickets, I think, in the Premier League this season for Goodison Park, and especially the back end of the season. So if you're not a season ticket holder, good luck trying to get one, because they are like gold dust.
It was basically when the Ipswich ones went up, I think yesterday, it was you had to have your 15 stubs, which is fair enough. It's totally fine. They deserve it, and they go, and some go away, don't they? Even if they haven't got a season ticket. So I've got no problem with that, But like you say, it's the way where tickets have gone and stuff like that. And they're also saying about resale. People have sold them on for extortionate amounts of money, but the club are aware of it, and they could be banned from Bramley Moor Dock, I was reading.
Yeah, I think it was in the Liverpool Echo this afternoon about the club was saying, if you're found to basically be selling on your ticket for profit, so to speak, then they're going to try and ban you. I think the problem is it's trying to keep a hold of that. I mean, I don't think it's too difficult. I think they know who's bought tickets. They know what seat numbers they are. They know who they're attached to by customer number. But you've got to then try and police that. So how do you police every single site that sells tickets second hand? But I'm sure the club have got ways and means of doing that. But I think it's more now in this day and age. You have obviously all these bots probably set up accounts, get all the tickets, and then sell them for a premium. That's the problem. It's sort of flushing all those out to make sure that proper fans can go in and obviously use a seat, and I think that's a difficult thing to sort of...
It's commonplace. It's commonplace across all events, music. It's the whole thing. The whole thing's wrong. So I don't know. It's so hard. It's just so hard the way it is.
It's the greed of modern society, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's modern society. Completely agree. But no, it's hopefully those who do get to go, they really do soak it all up and take it all in. And as you say, 3 games to go. 2 of those games are massively winnable. I think we beat Man City, to be honest with you, anyway. But I think 2 of those games we'd expect to win. And I think we need to make sure that Goodison Park, we close the doors on positivity, and you can't replay that final game. So let's make sure we go out with a win.
Brilliant.
Let's hope it's not a Monday night like that's rumoured going around as well.
Yeah, I mean that's the talk, isn't it? I've heard Sunday 7:00, and I've also heard the Monday night, and I think I don't get me wrong. I understand it from a Everton perspective. They wanted the sole focus was to be on saying goodbye to Goodison Park. So from an Everton perspective, from a Terry perspective, it makes sense. It's got to be a standalone game, and obviously that weekend is FA Cup weekend, and that's the only game on the Saturday's FA Cup final. So obviously you've got it's Sunday and Monday for the games, but hopefully they can. Sunday at 7 would be all right, wouldn't it?
I'd say that.
At all. You've got to think about fans who are travelling up and things like that. But if it puts Southampton fans off, obviously already relegated. So if it's a Monday night, there's even less chance that they're going to take their full allocation, which means more tickets available for Everton fans. So if we can get more Everton fans in there, then Monday night is Monday. That's absolutely fine.
Perfect. Mike, thank you so much, because I know you're busy doing what you're doing. Of course, me and Chris appreciate you coming on. I need to come on the Unholy Trinity. I know you put a Sunday to me a couple of months ago. I couldn't do it. I would love to come on. I'm sure Chris would love to come back on as well, of course.
It's been a while.
It's the centre of our universe is Everton, as you know, aside from doing this show. So thank you so much. The host of the Unholy Trinity Everton Podcast. Go and check them out. They're across all podcast apps, as well all social media, as Mike said earlier. Thank you so much, mate, for coming on for episode 50, the landmark episode 50 of Football Then and Now. We blend nostalgia and modern football together. And thank you so much, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Absolute pleasure, lads. You're welcome anytime at all.
Football Then and Now, a fun look at football nostalgia and the modern game intertwined. Join us.